exciting episode here of In the Biz. Finally. And I am extremely excited and stoked to have somebody with such esteem as the wonderful Jeff. Jeff, how do you pronounce your last name?
Seibenick.
Seibenick. Okay. It's exactly how I would have pronounced it. Now, Jeff, most of the people that are going to be watching this show are not familiar with, kind of the things that we do, and are probably looking to possibly even do something like what you do, getting into editing for film and television. And so, that's kind of who this is really kind of geared towards. So let's start with this. How did you get started doing what you do?
Well,
first of all, actually, let me stop you. Let me give you a better introduction. Saying Jeff has just come off of being nominated for editing The Mandalorian. So Jeff is an editor. So now, Jeff, how did you get started editing? How did you get started doing what you do?
I started making movies when I was probably 12 or 13.
Okay.
And, doing the old, now this is going to date me, but the VHS to camcorder to VHS.
Oh, yeah.
Thing.
I'm familiar with
so
that.
So I started learning how to put things together and the kind of tricks of the trade that you can use as an editor.
Yeah.
And then I went to film school, and I wanted to double major in directing and editing. And so I learned how to use the Avid, and I learned all the tricks from my teachers, and then I graduated from college, and I bought the very first Final Cut Pro, and I made movies all the time, and I even started my own little production company. So I was always constantly just on the computer. I'm telling you, if I was born 10 years later, I'd be making CGI movies and crazy visual effects and stuff. It's like all the technology was just starting to get cool for home use.
Yes.
Right when I was entering the workforce. So I was editing a lot of stuff doing that, and then it's just basically anything that I could cut, I would, free or pay or anything. And once I moved out to LA, I started working on a music video production company.
Okay.
And I was cutting music videos, and I was directing a couple of them, but nothing big or major. And then The Foot Fist Way came by, which was directed and written by my friends Danny McBride, Jody Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed somebody to edit their movie. And it just so happened I had Final Cut Pro in my kitchen in my studio apartment, which literally wasn't much bigger than this room.
I love it.
And so we edited The Foot Fist Way in there. And then, once that got into Sundance, that kind of got me a little career notoriety. And so then I went to the Sarah Silverman program, and that was my first professional TV job. And then after that, sky's the limit.
Yeah, I think that's when I met you. I met you, I don't know if you remember this or not. First of all, where did you go to film school?
I went to oh my God, great time to put a mouthful of cheese in your mouth. Sorry, this is my lunch.
Did you bring?
I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts.
North Carolina School of the Arts. Okay, so I met you at a Columbia College Chicago event. I think editor Peter Teschner was speaking, and I think that's when I met you. And I think you were on Sarah Silverman
at the time.
At the time, I'm pretty sure
that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. And you have since gone on to do, because your first big gig was with Danny McBride, but you also did some other things with him, right?
Oh yeah. Well, then after the Sarah Silverman program, after Foot Fist Way, they got a job to do a pilot for HBO called Eastbound and Down.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to edit that show. They wanted me to edit it, but I didn't have any professional experience, which is kind of why I went off and did the Sarah Silverman program. But not only that, I love the show and I wanted to work at it. It's actually one of my favorite experiences in my entire life. Everybody on that show could not have been cooler. And to this day, I'm friends with all of them still. Do you know what I mean? You run into them on the street and it's just oh, what's up, man? So then HBO said, okay, well, we'll let this guy cut your show. And so I cut the first season of Eastbound and Down. And it was only 6 episodes. But I remember it was I think that's when I got my best bit of advice from Danny and Jody.
Okay.
And I was real green, and I wanted to just kind of like be the editor. And at that point, I kind of thought that, well, the director would sit behind me and tell me what to do. And that is not the case with those guys, and has never been the case with anything I've done since. And so I remember there was a day, I'd come into work and I'd sit down on my computer and I'd just kind of wait. I'd be like, okay, what do you guys want to work on? What should we do? And they were like, see, we gotta talk. So they pulled me back into this little kitchen area, and they sat me down, and they're like, dude, we didn't hire you to do what we want. We hired you to bring your own creativity to this and then work together. And that was so eye-opening and such a floodgate of freedom for me.
That's a great amount of trust too.
Well, it really is, but it also made me realize that the editor is a creative force unto itself. Yeah. Like, you literally have the ability to rewrite, redirect, re-envision entire scenes in edit. Right. And so from a creative standpoint, I've always wanted to be a director, but from a creative standpoint, I have the same exact control at the computer, at the Avid, as I would on the set, except with this, it's a little less daunting because it's a finite amount of stuff.
Right. Correct.
But so once they released they gave me the freedom to just do my own thing, it was kind of like, now I'm an editor. And so then I started, I try this, try that. And the best thing is, it's like, if you have your first cut and you present that, that's the only time you're ever going to have that chance. So make it the best you can. You know what I mean? That was great. It was a great learning opportunity, because in everything else that I've ever cut since then, I just go all the way as close to the finished product as possible. Sound design, music, all over. Nice. I even do temp special effects. Like on the Mandalorian, I was doing tons of temp effects just because I want to sell the edit.
Right. So that there's a lot of information in what you just talked about. And one of the things that I kind of want to expand upon is the process of editor as storyteller, especially when it comes to something that's scripted. How does that work? How do you have a script in front of you? You have, as you just said, a finite amount of things that have been shot. How do you then take that and essentially kind of add your own creative sauce to it?
Well, I'll tell you what. I typically intentionally don't read the script. I'll skim it or I'll get an idea of it, but I want to reveal the story at the same time that an audience would. Now, even though they shoot things way out of order and stuff, I'll start cutting it. I'll look at the script to make sure, I'm hitting the right beats and stuff like that, but it's mostly just like a page at a time, as opposed to sitting there. Because I realized early in my career that I would read scripts and I'd come up with all these preconceived ideas of what I was going to get, and I'd start kind of almost cutting it in my head. Okay. And then I wouldn't get that footage. It wouldn't be anything like that. And it would really kind of f me up a little bit, because I'd sit there and I'd be like, oh, this doesn't work. This isn't what I expected. This wasn't what I wanted. But now when I see the footage and I watch and I search for the shot that I want to cut to next, I'm starting to familiarize myself with the story, and I'm sort of like unraveling it as it would be for an audience.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way, but that makes total sense to me, to kind of do it that way, and to also, as you just said, put yourself in the audience, the audience's shoes, so that you're feeling the emotional impact that they should be feeling.
It works really well too with comedy and also with suspense, because I'll see that they shot something, and the first time I watch the dailies, I usually start with the last take and then go backwards. And so I'll start watching, say for instance, I'll watch the master. Right. And whatever makes me laugh, I'll just put it down on the timeline. And then I'll look for a reaction shot.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm looking for a reaction shot, because that's where the joke is. The joke always lands on the reaction shot.
Yeah.
But then I'll find something else that's funny. And so I'll put that over here. And I'll kind of end up going through all of the dailies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I won't just sit there and watch dailies. Because that's like watching paint dry.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you end up finding all the little best bits. Like, for instance, the episode of The Mandalorian, the finale episode that starts with Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally as the speeder biker troopers.
Yeah.
I mean, they shot that scene for the entire day. I probably had, 8 hours of footage for that scene.
Wow.
And so I started cutting it together. And, they deviated from the script so far. I mean, you needed a map to get back to the script. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think my original cut of that was 22 minutes long. And the whole episode is like...
I was just going to say, just for that one scene?
Yeah, just that one scene. And it's hilarious. It's a great scene.
I'm wondering if we'll ever get to see, kind of an extent. I wonder if they'll ever do an episode of just that scene. There's been rumblings about it, but we've been busy because that hit. I mean, that scene hit social media like nothing. I mean, it was all over social media. Just those clips.
Well, I thought it was hilarious that they got mad at Jason Sudeikis because he punched the baby.
Well, I mean, it is Disney.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about. Obviously, want to talk about Mandalorian. So you, that was one of the, if not the first, kind of TV show to use virtual sets and to do stuff like that. So how did that? Were you a part of that process? Obviously, there was preparation that went into it ahead of shooting, and then you got the footage after that. And then the second part of that question would be, how much cleanup did you guys have to do in post for those scenes?
Well, okay, so I started on Mandalorian in May of 2018.
Oh.
And I was I was post-production. And I didn't have an assistant. There wasn't a producer. It was me in a room, and they were just starting to visualize or pre-visualize the first episode.
Right.
Up in San Francisco. They were shooting like mocap with actors and then sending it down.
Okay.
And I was in an office that was right off the volume where Jon Favreau had just shot all the mocap for Lion King.
Okay.
They were still using that facility, and he was sort of like learning this technology. And so they'd always come in and they'd say, hey, you should come out and see this. And I'd walk out and they'd start doing these tests, like with, like cameras or with virtual reality. They'd give you like a glass and you could see the sets. But it'd always be on this like half moon shaped thing, which was going to be the video wall.
Right.
So they started developing that as I was cutting previs.
Okay.
And that I didn't have anything to do with it, but that started to inform the previs, because then we hired a company called The Third Floor. Great group of guys, super talented. They do previs for all the big Marvel movies and everything.
Right.
And they came on site, and what they would do is they would work with Andrew Jones, the production designer, and they would get the exact dimensions of the sets that we were going to build, so that as I was cutting previs, they could watch and know exactly which scenes were going to be, okay, that's going to be on the volume, which is what we called it. That's going to be on the back lot. That's going to be on the set. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it started to become this thing where it's like, I remember we had one test shot where it was Mando walking towards the camera, and it was like a long hallway, and you saw this gigantic truck go by in the background. It never made it into the show.
Right.
But in this test shot, then the camera pulls out, and you see him, he's on a freaking treadmill, and there's a screen behind him. It was pretty amazing, dude.
Oh yeah, no, I watched the behind the scenes stuff on Disney Plus, and that was gonna be another question. Well, gosh, there's so much information, so many questions that I have. Actually, let me go back a little bit because you want
to know about cleanup?
We can come back to that. Because what I want to know is how did you get the job?
Oh, well, I got a job working with Jon Favreau on the pilot for Young Sheldon.
I didn't realize that Jon Favreau was on the pilot for Young Sheldon.
He directed the pilot for Young Sheldon.
I did not know that.
And, I've been a fan of his for decades, since Swingers.
Yeah.
And I loved his movie. In college, we used to watch Zathura all the time. And we were just so impressed with how good he made special effects look and stuff. And, there have been grumblings about a Star Wars TV series.
Yeah.
And there have been grumblings about Jon Favreau being involved, or not a series, but like a new set of movies coming out. This was before Force Awakens even.
Yeah.
And so I told my agent, it's like, I'd love to do this pilot with Jon Favreau. I think it was between that and another show, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to work with Jon Favreau. That sounds great. So we were working together, and he's a really great guy. He's super cool and chill and very, 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 very smart. And when I go to work everywhere, I have a set of Star Wars toys that I bring to my office just to kind of like have around my desk and stuff. So it's no surprise that I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we were in there one day, and John was asking me about the toys and stuff, and I didn't say anything yet because we were still kind of like in the middle of it. But I waited, and then around the time we were getting ready to be finished with the show, I remember I just turned around like first thing in the morning. I said, "Hey, John, I just got to tell you, if you ever do anything Star Wars related, do not look any further for the editor who will give it 125%.
Yeah.
Because this is what I want to do. It's my life's goal. So just let me know, right?" And he told me about how he was going to do this and that and the other thing. Nothing concrete.
Right.
Probably about 6 or 8 months later, I wake up to an email from my friend, and it's an article from Variety. Jon Favreau signs on to Disney Star Wars series. I emailed him. I didn't even get out of bed. I emailed him right there. "Hey, John, I just saw the release about this." And he emailed me back right away. He said, "Yeah, it would be really fun to work together again." And that was it. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant. And then like a month and a half later, I get a call from the head of Lucasfilm Post. And I'm just losing my mind.
Nice.
And I was finishing up a pilot right then. And like literally could not have been luckier. The week after my pilot finished, I was on The Mandalorian.
Nice. That is really good timing. And you actually just said something again. You keep talking and you keep saying things that I want to talk about. You just said something. You just mentioned that you had an agent.
Yes.
So, agents are obviously very, big for, above the line people. And I know below the line people like editors and cinematographers and stuff like that, they have agents as well too. How does an agent work for you in getting you gigs and getting you jobs? Because I know, editing is also about relationships too. So you typically have a lot of those relationships already with some of those people that you're going to be working on in a particular show, or you might get a referral or whatever. So how does an agent help you in your career?
Well, it's weird because, like, I would say you don't need an agent most of the time. Mm-hmm. But that one time that you do need an agent, it totally pays off. I wouldn't have gotten the job on Young Sheldon had it not been for my agent. And I don't think she hustled for me. I don't think she, like, went out and, pounded on doors and demanded they hire me. But I think she saw it. She knew about it. She submitted me. They saw it. They liked my work. I know Jon Favreau's a fan. And he's good friends with Sarah Silverman. Okay. And so I think I may have like hit up Sarah and be like, "Hey, do you think you could put in a good word for me?" And she was definitely a glue that binds because. But if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't be on The Mandalorian. Right. But did I need them to get Eastbound Down? No. Did I need them to get? It's like you start meeting people and they remember you and then they call you and you know what I mean? And that's how kind of like it worked all through my career. It's like I would edit, and this is the advice I give to all new editors. It's like you're not going to get an agent because you know how to use an Avid. Yes. So what you need to do is use the Avid or the Final Cut Pro or the Premiere, whatever it is you're on. Right. And just edit.
Yeah.
Just edit for free, edit for cheap, edit for little to nothing. Like, you'll get that dude who just made an indie movie who needs an editor, cut it.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
Yeah.
The movie turned out great. He might go off and do something great. He's going to remember you. He's going to call you back.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. It's similar to some of the things that I tell people. You know, you need to, first you need to figure out what you want to do, and then you need to do it, because
you have to love it.
Yes, you do. You really have to have a passion for it, and and because it's. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with me when I say that that being in this business is very soul sucking sometimes. It can take the energy out of you. So if you don't love what you do, you're not going to stick to it. You're not going to stick with it. And plus also too, people know and see your passion. So if you're passionate about something, that's addictive. That passion is addictive, and it feeds off of it.
Sorry about the dog.
Oh, you're fine. So we talked about the agent. I talked about how you got on. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. So on the Mandalorian, you are not the only editor on the show. So
I want to be. I really, really, really begged them to let me cut the whole fucking series, but it was very apparent very early on that it would not be possible.
Yeah. The other part of it too is that I was a little surprised that John didn't direct every episode, but I know he was very integral in the process of every episode.
Oh, dude, involved to the minute, down to the last detail. Every single thing went through John. He really was a force on that show. Like, he really, really, really was hands-on.
I think you said something the other night at the Emmy event that while there were all these other directors, really the only person that really whose opinion really mattered was John's.
Yes, but John is very collaborative, and he's very generous, and he loves working together. Mm-hmm. So he would always defer to the director or the editors or he's always constantly asking Dave Filoni what he thinks, and he asks Doug Chang, the designer who helps us design the productions. Yeah. He's always checking in with everybody.
Well, it looked like Dave Filoni had a really big part in just about every episode as well too.
Dave Filoni did. Him and John worked on every script together.
Okay.
Dave is kind of like, he's the shining beacon of Star Wars. Like, he's the guru.
Yeah. Every
single Star Wars detail he knows implicitly, and that's where we go. That's who we go to.
Yeah.
From literally, the color of a hologram to the size of a stormtrooper's boot. He knows it.
That's crazy. It's crazy, but it's good. Yeah. You want somebody on that. You want somebody like that on your team. Not just to keep you honest, but also to make the end product.
Right. Well, we got a lot of really rabid fans that have to be pleased. Yes. If we don't do it right, they are going to tear it down.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's kind of how I felt after the Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny too, because I actually waited until.
No, wait, shut up. No, stop. No, I loved Last Jedi. I thought Last Jedi was I felt that way after Rise of Skywalker.
Interesting, because I actually liked Rise of Skywalker better than Last Jedi, but
I thought Last Jedi was amazing. It stole my breath and took it away. It was amazing. I loved it. It was like Empire Strikes Back all over again.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I just recently watched Empire with my two boys, and it's a whole nother experience watching it with the young ones for the first time, and it's funny too, because I hadn't watched Empire in a while until we watched then, and it was just like, man, even after all these years, this film is still so good. It really is.
It really is, man.
Yeah.
And they run it on cable now. It's always on TNT. Like every other weekend, they play all three of them. I put it on all day long. My wife is sick of Star Wars. She can't stand it. My daughter's not even 2 yet, and I'm trying. I try so hard to get her to watch. The only way I get her to watch is if I pull out the toys and then pull them up as they appear on screen. She loves C-3PO.
No worries.
Oh, shut your mouth. Come here. Come on. Working from home, everybody.
Yeah, you might as well get in on the interview, buddy. It's funny. I saw the original Star Wars when I think when they re-released it before Empire. Before Empire came out, I want to say the year before Empire came out, they re-released Star Wars in the theater. So that's when I saw it. So I was, Empire came out in what, 81?
80.
80, yeah, I'm sorry, 80. Yeah, so, yeah, because I was 5, yeah. So, because I was born in 75, so I was too young to see the original Star Wars when it came out in 77. But it's funny, it's like when my oldest turned 5, I was like, okay, we're going to watch Star Wars. That's about how old I was when he was not having it at all. He's like, no.
What do you mean?
No, it was too scary for him.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And it was like, and I totally appreciate that. So I didn't force it and push it on him. And so it was probably about another year or so before he was able to actually finish watching the whole thing. But we were only able to watch like 5-10 minutes of it. And he's like, yeah, no, too scary. And, I'm a little sensitive to that only because when I was a few years older than he was, I saw Salem's Lot for the first time. And that was the first horror movie I'd ever seen, and it freaked me out. And
what scared the bejesus out of me? And I didn't even see the damn movie, and I wouldn't watch it. I went over to our neighbor's house with my mom, and their high school age daughter, was watching Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah.
I must have been 4 or 5.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked at the TV, and it was the scene when the tree was eating a little kid. Man, that gave me nightmares for years.
Yeah. The other one that did that for me was Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I never watched those. I was a wuss, man.
Well, and it's funny too because I've never been a fan of horror, and as I've gotten older, I'm even less of a fan of it. But man, some of those classics, I definitely had to watch those. When I was younger, I was a lot braver in that regard. But so back to Mandalorian. So what was it like working with different directors in the room?
Man, it was interesting because I worked with I did 4 episodes on season 1, but I also cut the previs for I think 2 others. I did 101, 102, 103, a little bit of 105, and 107.
Okay.
Those are the episodes that I cut. So I worked with Deb Chow and Dave Filoni and Rick Famuyiwa.
Okay.
And Taika Waititi came in later.
Right.
When we developed 108.
Right.
It's interesting because a lot of what happened was the directors would work with the previs team out in the bullpen.
Right.
Designing shots. And then, a day or 2 later we would get the shots and we'd cut them together and sound design. and we ended up actually recording our own dialogue. It would be me and my assistant editor and our post supervisor. She'd come in and do some female voices. Anybody who was around, we'd record them.
Right.
And so then the director would come in and watch, and we would kind of work it out.
Okay.
But there was not a lot of tweaking that went on in that stage as far as the directorial, because it was mostly about, okay, this is how we can shoot it.
Right.
This is where it will be. This is cool. What we found a lot about was the story.
Right.
So in episode 3, which was Deb's first episode, that was going to be the second time we saw the flashback with the armorer. and it was going to be the first time we were going to see it was in 102.
Okay.
Which is Rick's episode.
Right.
So Deb designed this flashback, and that was going to be it. It was going to be in 2 and then in 3, and that was it.
Right.
Well, I ended up having all of my episodes were the ones with the armor in it. It was episode 1, episode 3, and episode 8.
Okay.
And I started thinking that we should probably space this out over the course of the armorer scenes, as opposed to making it like in episode 2. It was after Mando falls off the sandcrawler.
Right.
He kind of blacks out, and we go into a flashback there.
Right.
So Deb did a lot of work figuring out like the rhythm of the cuts and how it would flash to, and then when Taika came in, he kind of helped augment that by designing like the full flashback with the Mandos coming down, and the whole story that we would then reveal.
Right.
And so it became a thing where it's like, okay, now we can start spacing this out, but we didn't see that until all of those pre-BIZs came in. It's like, okay, this is where we should have these things happen and help inform the story, because we would pre-BIZ the entire episode. Yeah. Every episode.
No, it makes sense. Totally.
Dialogue scenes, and it was so that's a lot of that happened, but it was when the directing on set came, and then when they would come and work with us, that's where we got a lot of the the most one-on-one time. Yeah. I would say though that the common thread for all the directors that we worked with was how childlike excitement they all had. Yeah. Like, this is going to be so cool. I can't wait. I mean, we're sitting there looking at the roughest of rough stuff, and everybody gets that little kind of giddy, like Star Wars excitement,
Well, I mean, it's also kind of one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize when it comes to filmmaking is the idea of having a clear vision in your head. And it's sometimes I'll have a conversation with my wife. Like I just finished a short film, and all through the process, when I would talk about it, when I would have conversations with her about it, it was always I felt sorry for her because it was always very cryptic, because I see it in my head, and my brain is working a lot faster than my mouth can work, and so sometimes vocalizing the thought that's in my head is not happening correctly. So I can, I think what a lot of people don't really realize is that, you really have to have a very clear vision in your head of how things are going to work. And I think that plays, with just about every role, in the process. You need to have that clear vision. So it's good to have somebody like John on there to kind of be that glue that kind of holds everything together.
And the other thing too is about John is that he knows exactly what's possible.
Yeah.
I didn't, man. This is the first time I'd ever done anything that was so visual effects intensive. And what I found being extremely difficult was like cutting scenes, either action or drama, where an entire character was going to be CGI. Because they would shoot a couple of takes with the stand-in, it's like a big tall dude in a gray suit wearing an IG-11 hat. And he barely delivered the dialogue,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I would have to compare that to the pre-BIZ, which was very, very different by the time they got to the shooting stage. Right. Not all of it was, the same. Yeah. Sometimes it was, not all of it.
Right.
But the fact that the main character doesn't have a face, you really can do anything with him.
Yeah.
But it's about digging and finding the subtle movements that say. It's kind of like where you would cut to somebody's and their eyes would tell the story. This is more about physical, like a head tilt or a turn or a nod. Like these little tiny movements and motions became like the performance that we would craft.
Right. So that actually leads to kind of one of the things that I asked earlier, which was so in the post process, how much cleanup were you guys doing? Was there, would you get you would obviously get visual effects shots from whoever's doing the visual effects, and you'd have to cut things in and stuff like that. But how much work did you guys have to do in terms of cleanup?
You mean, well, I don't know what you mean by that. Like, what do you mean, like us?
So, I mean, in editorial, did you have a visual effects editor, or were you doing the editing of those things into the essentially kind of what was the final?
We had a few visual effects editors, but what they were mostly responsible for was keeping track of the shots and the vendors and where those shots were coming from and what they were for.
Okay.
And then, because we literally were tweaking and editing and changing and fine cutting all the way up until the final DI.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
So there'd be a change or something, especially like with that scene in 208 when they're on the lava river and Mando and IG are having a conversation, and IG says, like, you know, I'm going to go out there and self-destruct. Mm-hmm. And that was like a powerful, dramatic scene, and it sucked my first cut. Because I had the dude in the stand-in, and I had the Mando, and like I was kind of trying to rush through it because it didn't feel good to me. And John knew it, and he saw it, but he never said anything until we started seeing the visual effects coming.
Okay.
And then you see this robot, and you see Mando reacting to it, and then it's like, okay, let's hold on this longer. Let's cut to this later. Let's expand this. And then it became like, wait, maybe his arm shouldn't go this way. It should go this way. And maybe his head should turn, and then he walk. You know, it's like we start kind of like inventing the performance as we saw the shots come in, which is so much easier to do once you can actually have something to work with.
Right. And
that greatly informed that scene, for instance.
So that actually leads me to a really good question, which is, so I mean, like you had just said, you've been working on this since 2018. You guys did all the previs before the shoots happened. Then you have the shoots, and you get the footage coming in and whatnot. But obviously, there are holes that need to be filled by the visual effects, and so once you get those in, then you got to put those in. Then you're probably doing an audio pass, I would assume, And I mean, I realize that there's post audio work that you're not necessarily a part of or anything like that, but I can only imagine how many different versions of each episode there were, or how many sequences, I should say, in the process. Like when you yeah, I would have to assume it. So I can only imagine the organizational process of all of that as well too, because obviously you would have to separate pre-production from production, and then probably obviously post work. But how do you manage all of that? I mean, how does that all work?
You've got a lot of really talented, smart people who are really good at their jobs. Somebody asked me this, and I did a class the other day, and they said, what's the difference between editing something that's like this big budget and doing something much smaller? And I have to say, there really isn't much difference for me. The editing process is always the same, and it always is the same in terms of what I bring to it. This just so happens to have a shitload of special effects, a ton of laser bolts. We have access to the entire Skywalker sound Star Wars library of sound effects.
I'm sure you can't copy those over to a hard drive.
Can't do. But dream come true. Like the day that I got those, I remember I pulled my assistant into the room and I was like, dude, and I started playing the Doors to Jabba's palace, and we were getting giddy, you know what I mean? And there's creature walls and stuff like this. So we spend all this time doing our sound effects, and I mean all this time. Because when we first start designing a sound design, it's to the previs, which is all animation. Yeah. So we're talking footsteps, cloth rustles, armor, movement, backgrounds, winds, lasers. I mean, every single thing you can. And I think that sound is probably the most important thing to me. Yeah. Like a lot of people will spend hours and hours on, the look and the lighting of a shot. Unfortunately, I spend that much time on the sound because I feel like sound is more important to the overall product. So by the time they got to the shooting, it was kind of like, well, let's take our sound design from this and stick it in here and move a couple of things around. So that was already done. Right. And then we lived with that. And then visual effects would come in, and they wouldn't match to a sound, or they wouldn't pick up on a cue So we have to say, hey man, this is supposed to be here, and this is what this is, and then you kind of explain it to them. And all three of us became sort of the custodians of our own episodes,
right?
Because you had so many different people doing their specific parts of each episode,
okay,
that we sort of started to be the supervisors of it all. I mean, obviously John was there but he didn't have the brain capacity to remember all the minutia.
Yeah, no.
You know, or it's like the timing of a CGI character that I temped in with, you know, a still image that I grabbed from Previs where it like moves across the screen. It's like, well, you know, from here to here is the timing, but do whatever you want in there.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we would constantly be going back and forth with them about, you know, timing and sound, and then ultimately when it came down to the mix, John wanted us editors to sit in because we had sat with the sound for so long and lived with it for so long.
Right.
John wanted to make sure that what they turned over was what we were used to.
Okay.
You know, I remember I had sort of a little argument with Bonnie, who just won. I forget her last name, but she just won the Emmy, and it was her and Matt Wood, because I put in the sound of the Millennium Falcon when Mando tries starting his Razor Crest,
right?
But it kind of dies. You know that classic.
Yep.
And I put that in because I fucking loved it, and they were like, "Well, this is the Millennium Falcon." It's like, yeah, I know, but it's like a classic sound. I want to hear it. But they ultimately won, and they took it out. And then when we showed, John was like, "No, I want to hear the Millennium Falcon." Because we just gotten so used to it, and it was so good.
I bet you felt vindicated on that one.
I did, of course, I did feel a little bit vindicated. Although, you know, going further down the season, I did start to kind of like realize, like, yeah, we can't use Han Solo's blaster.
Yeah, I know.
Grief Karga. Like when we did our temp sound, Grief Karga's blaster was always Han Solo's, but that is Han Solo's blaster. Don't fuck with it.
Which is hilarious because, you know, probably most people would never get it, but you would have that segment of the nerds that would that would totally get it.
You know, there's a scene in there that I picked this out late in the mix, but there's a scene in there when he comes into the bar and he's got his shiny new armor on.
Yeah. It's
episode 3. And Grief Karga's like, you know, look at all these people, they're jealous of you, Mando. And then it cuts to that one bounty under the bar and he goes, Ichuta. Well, I pulled that out because I remember when the weird C-3PO comes out of Cloud City and Empire Strikes Back, and he goes, Ichuta. And C-3PO goes, how rude. So I thought that was kind of like the Star Wars version of like, eat it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we literally pulled that recording and then put it in that's the exact same recording from the movie.
Nice.
Like deep dives, man. Deep dives into that nerd is awesome.
Oh yeah, no. So, you know, on a typical hour-long drama, you're probably going to be in post for, you know, maybe about a week or two. You know, and I realize that this, you know, something like Mandalorian is different than, you know, Breaking Bad or, you know, or a drama like that. How, you know, because you've been on this since 2018, but like how long would you say that that each episode took in terms of your job?
Man, it's so hard to tell because I was juggling so many. It was so awesome. I loved it so much because I love being busy and I love constantly working. Yeah. And I was juggling 4 episodes, and at a point I was reviewing visual effects for 1 and 3. Mm-hmm. I was cutting episode 6 and doing previs for episode 8 all at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
And then, you know, like once they shot episode 8, I didn't have any of the flashbacks.
Right.
Because Taika directed all that. Yeah. But Deb helped design it. So, like, I had all the previs in the 2 different spots where the flashback was supposed to happen. And then Taika went and shot it and was like, whoa, this is fucking awesome. But it was totally different than what we had previs. Right. So, you know, now I had to go back, reopen up episode 1 and 3, cut all of the, like, figure out the best bits for the flashback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, from beginning to end, I mean, if you think about it, I started in May 2018. Yeah. I got an assistant in August of 2018.
Wow, okay.
I would say that, I mean, honestly, dude, and it aired in September of 2019.
Wow, okay. Wow.
So I would say, or was it November? I think it was November 11th of 2019.
It was right when, I think
that was the air date.
Yeah.
So I would say that, if you consider the fact that I did the previs and the edits on episode 1, 3, 6, and 8, I was pretty much doing something for each of those that entire time.
Okay.
There were days that were a little less busy.
Yeah.
But there were days that were like just wall to wall, just can't stop cutting.
Now, how would you say that, I mean, obviously with the amount of time, that you've been on this particular show, it's a lot different than something like Eastbound and South, or even Young Sheldon for that matter. How would you, how long would it, for Young Sheldon, how long were you on that? I mean, that's because that's a Chuck Lorre show. So, Chuck Lorre's, he's notorious for, kind of wanting what's on the script, to be represented on the screen. So, what was that like in terms of versus something like this? Did you feel like you had less freedom, more freedom?
Like apples and oranges.
Okay. All right. Just the look on your face said it all.
Yeah, it's not really about the freedom.
Yeah.
Cutting Young Sheldon was really fun, but it was like a month.
Yeah. Right.
I started and then they were shooting and I went to the set a couple times and then, I had a week to do my cut and then John and I worked for a week and then Chuck came in and worked for a week and then I finished and that was it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this show. It's like, for the first time in my career, I've been lucky enough to be absolutely, utterly involved from the very, very inception of the idea, which is so cool.
It is.
And so gratifying. And I think even at the beginning, they kind of used me as a little bit of a litmus test because they knew I was a Star Wars nerd and I was like a kid in a candy shop every day.
Right.
Every time something new. Like, I remember the day that they first got an actor to wear the Mandalorian costume. They asked me to come upstairs. They said, "Hey, Jeff, can you come upstairs for a second?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, be right there." And I'm just kind of walking up, and then I go around the corner and I see this dude, and he's like 6 feet tall, full Mandalorian costume with the gun and the thing, and I stopped dead in my tracks and lost my breath.
Nice.
They lost their minds. Nice. Everybody started laughing at me because I was just like.
Yeah.
Jaw on the floor. You know what I mean?
I'm sure they all thought immediately, we got something special here.
I was going to say, it's kind of like, if I wasn't a Star Wars fan and I was cutting it, I don't think they would have as much fun watching my reaction to things.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. So we've been going for a while. I want to ask one or two more questions, and then that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. Season 2. Are you working on season 2?
I cannot confirm or deny any details about season 2.
Well, then that's going to put a damper on.
But I did just see the trailer. And it's dope. I can't wait.
Because that was actually going to lead into another question, which was, now that we are in this kind of weird world that we're living in right now, what is it? I mean, you are working. You're still working. You're still meeting. You have a meeting right after this. So, what? I mean, is it? Obviously, it's not the same. I realize it's not the same as being in a room with a bunch of people and talking about.
It's not the same, dude, but it's also not that different.
Okay.
And I tell you, because us editors, I'm sure you know, and all your audience knows, we show up.
Yeah.
We close the door.
Yeah.
We dim the lights, and we don't come out for 8 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like my relationship with my computer is the same as it was at the office. I would say the only difference is I miss my standing desk.
Okay.
I miss the camaraderie of having coworkers, because one of the most fun things to do is call in another editor and be like, "Yo, come here, watch this. What do you think of this?" Or like, "Hey, man, what do you think I could do with it's like I miss that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly
don't miss the commute.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that one. I was supposed to start working at NBC in March, and then that all went out right out the door. So, but that actually is kind of similar, kind of second part of the question, which was, because I know I worked on a bunch of Disney Channel stuff years ago, and the company that I was working for, being a third-party vendor, had to go through, because of the Sony hack, they went through all the studios went through a massive security overhaul and whatnot. And I know, at least with Disney, you couldn't have your work machine couldn't be connected to the internet, so you had to have an editing or workstation machine and then an email machine. And it was the same way at NBC last year. So how do you work by not essentially kind of, are you able to dial in, or do you have somebody bring a hard drive to you? Like, how are you able to actually work now in this? We have encrypted hard drives.
Okay. I'm constantly on iMessage with my assistant.
Okay.
Constantly, all day, back and forth, and we'll share cuts back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, iMessage. But then there's a secure server.
Okay.
When he has dailies, he'll send me the dailies and the bins, and then I log into, download those,
Gotcha.
and then I put them on the drives.
Okay.
And then it kind of lines up to the avid that way.
Okay, good.
It's very easy, dude. He does all of his assistant work over at his house, sends it to me. I give him notes, he'll send it back, and it's honestly, dude, this is how I worked in the office too.
So there's not
the only difference is we were on a Nexus and we were all kind of like interconnected with our media.
Right.
Like the only difference now is that I can't open up another person's cut.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're not waiting for a day downloading all this stuff and then waiting to upload stuff and whatnot. Okay.
Yeah.
I was really kind of curious as to how something like that, especially.
But the saddest thing is though, is the sound mix, which it just happens to be my absolutely favorite step of the process.
Yeah.
It's when you get in there with the pros and you dial in and you finally hear it in 5.1 surround sound or 7.1 Atmos. We had an Atmos set up in the we had a review room at the old building where we were cutting season 1.
Yeah.
And they had put an Avid in there and then all these couches and a great big TV, and then Skywalker came and wired it for Atmos. And oh my god, there's a subwoofer as big as my current desk.
Oh, I bet.
You know what I mean?
I bet.
But that's how we got to mix it. But now on this show that I'm working on, it's kind of a bummer because I'm logging in to a secure thing, and I'm communicating with the sound people just like this.
Right.
But I'm listening to it on stereo headphones.
I know. Well, any final thoughts, any last words, any advice that you would want to give to somebody who is thinking about a career in editing?
I'll tell you what, dude, it's a very fun job. It's very creative. It's very competitive. You won't get the recognition that you want. Nobody will appreciate you for what you do, and that's okay. Because the right people know.
Yeah.
Like you have the directors and the producers who all pat you on the back and say, great work, good job, but they're not putting out the red carpet for the editor.
Right.
You never go see the new picture edited by.
True. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
If that's what you're getting into this game for, then you're in the wrong. Yeah. You're sniffing up the wrong tree.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's such an important collaborative part of the process, and it's really gratifying and super fun. And a guy like me, I could never write a feature script because it just takes too long. But with editing, you get to see instant results. You make a cut and you can see it, and you put down a piece of music and you can hear it, and then you make another cut, and next thing you know, you've got a whole scene in your and it's like a good pace and it's fun. And I really do love the pace of TV too, because where a person could work on a feature for as long as we worked on the Mandalorian, and that's one story.
Yeah.
But here we had 8 different stories. You're constantly creating and collaborating, and just so much going on. It's always just a very fun There's always something new. It's always exciting.
It looks like an extremely fun experience to be a part of, and watching the behind the scenes stuff and all that. I mean, I get as much of a kick out of watching that kind of stuff as much as I do watching the actual episodes themselves too, because it's always fun and fascinating to just kind of see what's going on in the minds of the people who are there working to make it a good experience for the audience.
But and you notice they never did an episode about the editors.
I know.
But you know why? Because editing is really boring if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what it is or what you're looking at, it's not even that much fun to talk about. It's like, so I did an 8-frame trim on this one shot, and the next thing you know, I had to cut to a reaction shot.
No, you're right. You're right. It's funny. I one of my favorite editing experiences was on a Showtime show I worked on, about 10 years ago, more than that actually, and the lead editor on the show, we made a bet. He was going to cut together a scene because it was a comedy show and it was live to tape, and so he was going to cut the intro to the outro, basically try and make it seamless. And there was a shot between where one of the comedians was standing in the intro. He was standing, and in the outro he was sitting. And I was like, "There's no way you're going to be able to cut this together seamlessly." And he totally did. Every time I watch that show, every time I watch that episode, I'm like, I know it happened, and I still
nobody else does.
Yeah, and it still blows my mind. And
it's kind of like your parents or your family that just say, "So what do? You just cut out the bad stuff?"
Well, but explaining that to somebody who's not an editor or who doesn't necessarily know about that, it's like watching paint dry, like you just said. So,
and unless you have like the scene as it was, and then the scene as it's finished, it's like whatever's on the screen. It's kind of like you don't know what goes into the sausage. It's just going to be
exactly. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, my pleasure, man. It's been a lot of fun.